The sun hung low over the dusty outskirts of Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Route 17. It was one of those late afternoons where the heat shimmered like a mirage, turning the horizon into a blur of gold and haze. Little Tommy Hale, no more than 8 years old, stood trembling on the roadside, his small face streaked with tears and dirt. His backpack hung lopsided from one shoulder, and his sneakers were scuffed from running. "They took my mum's purse," he sobbed, to no one in particular, his voice breaking like fragile glass. A group of rough-looking men had pulled up in a beat-up truck just minutes earlier, snatching the worn leather bag from his mother's hands while she bent to tie his shoe. She chased after them for a block before collapsing, her cries echoing faintly as the truck sped away. Now Tommy was alone, the weight of fear pressing down on him like the relentless sun, his world reduced to the empty stretch of highway and the distant rumble of engines he couldn't yet identify. From the south, a low growl pierced the quiet, a convoy of motorcycles tearing through the heat waves, their chrome gleaming like polished steel under the dying light. Leading the pack was Ethan Ridge Harlan, a weathered man in his late 40s whose leather vest bore the faded emblem of the Iron Vow Riders, a brotherhood forged in the fires of old wars and unbreakable oaths. Ethan's face was a map of scars, and slicing across his jaw from a long-ago skirmish in the sands of forgotten battles, another hidden beneath the stubble on his cheek from a night he didn't talk about. He rode a black Harley that purred with the soul of a beast, its engine a thunderous heartbeat that drowned out the boy's whimpers. The convoy numbered 20 strong, a rolling wall of denim, tattoos, and quiet resolve, their bikes kicking up clouds of dust that swirled like ghosts in the wind. Ethan spotted the boy first, his sharp eyes narrowing behind aviator shades. He signaled with a gloved fist, and the pack slowed, engines cutting to a synchronized idle that vibrated through the ground. The men dismounted in unison, boots crunching on gravel, forming a loose semicircle around Tommy. One of them, a burly figure named Lucas, with a salt-and-pepper beard, knelt down, his massive frame somehow gentle as he placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Hey, kid," Lucas said softly, his voice gravelly but kind, like the rumble of a distant storm. "What happened here? Start from the beginning." Tommy looked up, eyes wide with a mix of terror and hope, the scent of exhaust and leather mixing with the dry earth around them. He spilled the story in halting bursts. The truck, the men laughing as they grabbed the purse, his mom on the ground clutching her side, whispering for him to run and find help. Ethan stood back, arms crossed, the wind tugging at his graying hair. He hadn't planned on stopping. The ride was meant to clear his head, to shake off the ghosts that clung to him like oil stains on his hands. 20 years ago, in the dim glow of a desert outpost, he'd made a promise to his fallen brother in arms. "Watch over the little ones, Ridge. Keep 'em safe when the world's gone mad." That vow had pulled him through the bottle, the empty nights, and into the Iron Vow, a crew of misfits who'd chosen family over blood, loyalty over law. But today, seeing Tommy's tear-streaked face, that old oath ignited like a spark on dry tinder. "These bastards think they can prey on the weak," Ethan muttered to no one, his jaw tightening. He pulled out his phone, thumbing a quick message to the network of riders scattered across the county. Within minutes, replies flooded in, more bikes mobilizing, engines revving in garages from Willow Creek to the next town over. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of crimson, the first responders arrived. Not sirens blaring, but the steady roar of additional Harleys joining the fray. Tommy's mother, Clara Hale, stumbled up from the roadside, her dress torn and face pale, supported by a neighbor who'd heard the commotion. She froze at the sight of the bikers, her eyes darting between their imposing figures and her son's huddled form. Who are you?" she whispered, voice laced with exhaustion and wariness. Ethan stepped forward, removing his shades to reveal eyes hardened by loss but softened by purpose. "Name's Ethan Harlan. We saw the kid, heard the story. Those thieves, they picked the wrong stretch of road today." He glanced at his crew, a nod passing like a silent command. The men spread out, checking the boy's description against local chatter on their encrypted app. A silver truck, 3 men, last seen heading toward the old mill district. Word spread like wildfire through Willow Creek, a sleepy town where folks minded their own until something stirred the pot. By dusk, as the bikers formed a protective ring around the Hales, the sheriff's cruiser pulled up, lights flashing lazily. Deputy Marcus Reed, a lanky man with a badge that felt too heavy on his chest, stepped out, hand hovering near his holster. "What's this? Some kind of vigilante hour?" he barked, eyeing the motorcycles lined up like sentinels. Ethan met his gaze steadily, the air thick with the smell of cooling engines and tension. "Just citizens helping out, Deputy. Boy's mom got robbed. We're making sure it doesn't happen again." Reed shifted uncomfortably. He'd heard tales of the Iron Vow, whispers of good men who'd bent rules for the right reasons. But this, a pack of bikers turning roadside guardians. It unsettled the fragile order he upheld. As night fell, stars pricking the velvet sky, the convoy didn't disperse. Instead, they escorted the Hales home, bikes flanking the family car like armored escorts. Tommy clung to his mother's hand, stealing glances at Ethan, who rode point with a quiet intensity. In that moment, amid the hum of tires on pavement and the faint scent of wild sage carried on the breeze, something shifted. The promise Ethan had buried deep resurfaced, binding him to this unexpected cause. Little did the town know this was only the spark, a single cry for help that would rally riders from across the state, unearthing secrets of corruption woven into Willow Creek's underbelly. The thieves had taken a purse, but they'd awakened a force rooted in honor, one that would ride through the darkness to deliver justice, not with fists, but with the unyielding truth of men who kept their word. The first hints of trouble deepened as Ethan pulled into the dimly lit lot of the Rusty Spur diner, the convoy idling behind him like faithful hounds. Clara insisted on buying them coffee, her hands shaking as she poured from a chipped pot. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, sliding mugs across the scarred wooden counter. The aroma of strong brew mingled with the diner's greasy haze, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Ethan took a sip, the bitterness grounding him. "No thanks needed. We ride for folks like you." But as they talked, Tommy piped up from his stool, describing the truck's license plate, a partial glimpse, enough to narrow the search. Lucas jotted it down, his phone already pinging with cross-checks from the Brotherhood's database. Outside, the night air cooled, carrying the distant howl of coyotes. Ethan's mind wandered to his own losses, a wife gone too soon, a daughter he'd failed to protect from the world's cruelties. This ride, this intervention, it was redemption's whisper, a chance to honor the vow that had saved him when nothing else could. The deputy lingered at the diner's edge, radio crackling with reports of the truck spotted near the river bend. Tension coiled like a spring, the bikers prepared to move, engines coughing to life. Willow Creek slept uneasily that night, unaware that the quiet act of kindness was unraveling a thread of greed tied to local shadows, crooked deals, silenced voices, and a moral reckoning on 2 wheels. The neon sign of the Rusty Spur flickered like a dying heartbeat against the inky night, casting erratic pools of red light across the gravel lot where the motorcycles stood sentinel. Ethan Harlan leaned against the counter, the warmth of the coffee mug seeping through his calloused fingers, but it did little to ease the knot tightening in his gut. Clara Hale sat beside her son, Tommy, her eyes shadowed with gratitude and lingering fear, the faint tremor in her voice betraying the ordeal's toll. "That plate. It started with a 7, I think," Tommy repeated, his small fingers tracing invisible numbers on the Formica tabletop. Lucas nodded, his phone screen glowing as he relayed the details to the Iron Vow's encrypted network. A web of riders who'd once shared foxholes and now shared a code etched deeper than ink. Outside, the air had turned crisp, carrying the metallic tang of the nearby river and the low murmur of engines warming up. Deputy Marcus Reed paced the lot's edge, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness like a hesitant blade. He'd radioed in the partial plate, but the response from dispatch was sluggish, laced with static that hid unspoken delays. Ethan watched him through the diner's grease-streaked window, sensing the man's unease. Reed wasn't corrupt. At least, not yet, but Willow Creek's undercurrents ran deep, pulling good folks into murky waters. Years ago, Ethan's own brother-in-arms, Jax, had whispered warnings from a hospital bed. The small towns hide big wolves, Ridge. Promise me you'll sniff 'em out for the innocents. That oath, sealed with a bloodied handshake, had anchored the Iron Vow, turning strangers into kin bound by more than leather and chrome. As the clock ticked past midnight, the diner's door swung open with a chime that cut the quiet like a knife. In strode Caleb Voss, a lanky rider from the eastern outpost, his jacket dusted with road grit and his eyes sharp as flint. "Got a hit," he said, voice low, sliding a crumpled printout across the counter. The partial plate matched a silver Ford registered to Harlan Mills, a name that rippled through the crew like a stone in still water. Mills wasn't just any local. He ran the old mill district, a labyrinth of rusted silos and forgotten warehouses where whispers of backroom deals echoed off concrete walls. Clara's face paled. "I've seen that truck before, parked outside the feed store last week. Rough types hanging around, laughing like they owned the place." Ethan's jaw set, the scar along it pulling tight as he absorbed the intel. This wasn't a random snatch. The purse held more than cash. Clara had mentioned IDs, a family photo, keys to their modest home on Elm Street. Taking it felt personal, a violation meant to instill fear. He stepped outside, the cool breeze whipping through his hair, and gathered the crew in a tight huddle. 20 pairs of eyes met his under the starlit canopy, faces weathered by sun and sorrow, each carrying their own buried promises. "We ride smart," Ethan said, his words steady as the river's flow. "No charging in blind, we track, we confirm, we call it right. For the kid, for the vow." Nods rippled through the group, a silent pact forged in the glow of taillights. The convoy reformed with practiced precision, engines roaring to life in a symphony that shook the diner's windows. Deputy Reed approached, his boots crunching gravel, hand raised in a half-protest. "Harlan, you can't just... This is official business now." Ethan's gaze held steady, the weight of unspoken histories passing between them. "Official's fine by us, Deputy, but if official drags its feet while folks suffer, we'll grease the wheels ourselves." Reed hesitated, the crackle of his radio urging him back to protocol, but a flicker of doubt crossed his features. Willow Creek's sheriff, old Harlan, no relation to Ethan, thank the stars, had ties to the mill crowd. Favors traded like poker chips. Reed knew it, the whole town did, in hushed tones over fences and at church potlucks. They rolled out in formation, headlights piercing the veil of night, like arrows aimed at the heart of shadow. The road to the mill district wound through cottonwood groves, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind, the scent of damp earth rising after a distant sprinkle. Tommy and Clara followed in a borrowed sedan, Lucas riding shotgun to keep them steady. Ethan's mind raced ahead, replaying fragments of his past, the explosion that claimed Jax, the shrapnel that mirrored the fragments of guilt he'd carried home. This ride wasn't vengeance, it was restitution, a quiet stand against the erosion of trust that gnawed at places like Willow Creek. At the district's edge, the silos loomed like ancient guardians, their corrugated sides glinting under a half-moon. The convoy slowed, fanning out to cover approaches, the growl of bikes fading to a tactical purr. Caleb spotted the silver truck first, tucked behind a chain-link fence, its hood still warm to the touch. No guards in sight, but faint voices drifted from a nearby shed. Coarse laughter, the clink of bottles. Ethan dismounted, signaling silence, his boots silent on the dew-kissed ground. Peering through a grimy window, he caught glimpses. 3 men, faces lit by a bare bulb, rifling through Clara's purse on a makeshift table. Wallets spilled open, papers scattered like fallen leaves. Heart pounding with restrained fury, Ethan pulled back, weighing the moment. Burst in, and it escalated to chaos. Wait for dawn, and evidence vanished. His phone buzzed, a text from Reed. Back up en route. Hold position. But holding felt like betrayal to the boy whose cry had started it all. "We do this clean," he murmured to Lucas, who nodded, his massive frame coiled like a spring. They crept closer, the air thick with the musty odor of rust and neglect. Every step a testament to the loyalty that defined them. Inside the shed, one thief, a wiry man with a tattoo snaking up his neck, held up the family photo, smirking. "Look at this. Happy little life. Bet they won't be smiling now." The words ignited something primal in Ethan, but he reined it in, whispering into his comms, "Position set. On my mark." The crew encircled the structure, shadows blending with the night, their presence a force as unyielding as the vows that bound them. As the first grey light of pre-dawn crept over the horizon, painting the silos in soft silver, the door creaked open. The men stepped out, oblivious, until the ring of bikers closed in. Not with shouts, but with the quiet authority of men who'd faced worse than petty crooks. "You boys forget something?" Ethan said, voice calm as polished steel, holding up the photo they'd discarded. The thieves froze, eyes widening at the wall of leather and resolve. No guns drawn, no threats hurled, just the weight of moral certainty pressing down. Deputy Reed's cruiser crested the hill then, lights off, arriving not as adversary, but ally in the unfolding light. Willow Creek's secrets began to crack, the purses returned a small victory, but the deeper rot, the ties binding Mills to the sheriff's office, stirred like smoke from embers. Ethan's promise echoed in the rising sun. Watch over the little ones. And as Tommy clutched the recovered photo, safe in his mother's arms, the iron vow rode on, guardians of honor in a world quick to forget. The first rays of dawn sliced through the mist-shrouded silos like golden blades, illuminating the tense standoff in the mill district. Ethan Harlan stood at the forefront, the family photo clutched in his gloved hand, its edges curling slightly from the night's dampness. The 3 thieves, wiry, tattooed, and reeking of stale sweat and cheap whiskey, halted mid-stride, their bravado crumbling under the encircling gaze of the Iron Vow riders. The air hung heavy with the scent of rusting metal and river mud, the only sounds the faint drip of condensation from overhead pipes and the subdued rumble of idling engines. No one moved aggressively. It was a confrontation woven from quiet resolve, the kind that spoke louder than shouts. The leader of the trio, a man with a neck tattoo, twisting like a serpent, narrowed his eyes at Ethan. "This ain't your business, old man. Walk away before you regret it." His voice cracked, betraying the bluff, as he glanced toward the silver truck, its door still ajar with Clara's purse spilling onto the seat like a discarded secret. Ethan didn't flinch, his scarred jaw set firm. The morning light, catching the silver threads in his hair. Behind him, Lucas and Caleb flanked the group, their presence a wall of leather and loyalty, while the rest of the convoy held positions at the perimeter, shadows blending with the awakening light. Tommy and Clara watched from the borrowed sedan, parked just beyond the chain-link fence, the boy's small hand gripping his mother's sleeve. His earlier tears dried into salty tracks on his cheeks. Deputy Marcus Reed's cruiser rolled to a stop with a crunch of gravel, its lights now off, blending into the scene rather than dominating it. Reed stepped out, his uniform rumpled from the night's vigil, and approached with measured steps, the radio on his belt emitting a soft, static hum. "Everyone stand down," he called, his tone authoritative yet laced with an undercurrent of relief. He eyed the thieves, recognizing the wiry one as a known hanger-on in Harlan Mills' crew. "You three, hands where I can see 'em. This ends now." The men complied slowly, the fight draining from them like air from a punctured tire as Reed cuffed them one by one. Ethan handed over the photo and purse without a word, the exchange a silent bridge between badge and brotherhood. As the thieves were loaded into the cruiser, Reed pulled Ethan aside, the two men standing beneath a sagging warehouse awning where the air smelled of damp wood and forgotten grain. "Harlan, you and your boys just saved me a headache, but this runs deeper than a purse snatch." Reed's voice dropped, his eyes scanning the empty lot as if expecting shadows to stir. "That truck's registered to Mills, and Mills, he's got the sheriff in his pocket. Protection rackets, shaking down folks like the Hales for tolls on their routes. Clara's husband worked the Mills years back, before he vanished. They think it's tied to unpaid debts." Ethan's gut twisted, the words echoing the ghosts of his own past. Jax's warnings about wolves in sheep's clothing, the promises made over foxholes to shield the vulnerable from such predators. Clara approached then, the purse clutched to her chest like a talisman, its contents intact save for a few crumpled bills. "Thank you," she whispered to Ethan, her voice steadying in the warming light. Tommy peeked from behind her, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and lingering fear, the dawn painting his face in soft hues. Did you get them for good?" the boy asked, his small voice cutting through the tension. Ethan knelt to his level, the gravel biting into his knees, and placed a gentle hand on Tommy's shoulder, the same gesture Lucas had used hours before. "We got 'em today, kid. But keeping folks safe, that's a promise we ride for every day." The words carried the weight of his vow, forged in desert sands and carried on two wheels, a lifeline pulling him from the abyss of loss. Word of the dawn takedown rippled through Willow Creek like ripples on the river, stirring the town from its uneasy slumber. By mid-morning, as the sun climbed higher and baked the asphalt into shimmering waves, the Iron Vows network buzzed with alerts. More riders converged from outlying chapters. Veterans like Samuel Forge Kane, a broad-shouldered mechanic with hands scarred from engine fires and old wounds, and young Jonathan Reyes, whose quick eyes and faster bike had earned him scout duties. They gathered at the edge of town, in a sun-dappled clearing ringed by cottonwoods, the scent of pine sap mingling with exhaust. Ethan briefed them under the shade, maps spread on a bike saddlebag, the partial plate and Mills's name marking the path forward. But as the group planned, a shadow fell across their resolve. Caleb's phone lit up with a tip from an anonymous source in the sheriff's office. Mills had bailed the thieves before, and whispers suggested he'd target the Hales next, intimidation to silence any talk of the missing husband. Ethan's mind flashed to his daughter, lost to illness years ago, her final days haunted by unanswered questions about his absences. This wasn't just about a purse anymore. It was about uprooting the corruption that preyed on families like his once was, fulfilling the oath to watch over the little ones when the system turned blind. The sheriff himself, Elias Harlan, no kin to Ethan, but the name alone twisted like a knife, arrived at the clearing in his unmarked SUV, dust billowing in his wake. He was a portly man in his 60s, badge gleaming falsely under the sun, his face flushed with feigned authority. "Harlan!" he barked at Ethan, ignoring the circle of riders who tensed like coiled springs. "You overstepped. Those men were just joyriders. Let the law handle it." Ethan's crew shifted subtly, engines humming in warning, but he raised a hand for calm. The air thickened with unspoken accusations, the sheriff's cologne clashing with the earthy breeze. "Law's what we're fighting for, Elias," Ethan replied evenly, his voice a low rumble. But when it bends for men like Mills, we straighten it out. You know why her husband disappeared. Town knows." Elias's eyes darted, sweat beading on his brow despite the shade. He blustered about warrants and jurisdiction, but the doubt in his stance betrayed him. Years of favors traded for silence eroding his foundation. As he retreated to his vehicle, tires spinning gravel in haste, the riders exchanged glances, the moral crossroads sharpening. Samuel clapped Ethan on the back, his grip firm as forged iron. "We've faced worse than a crooked star, Ridge. The vow holds." They mounted up, the convoy swelling to 30 strong. A thunderous procession heading toward Mills's stronghold, a fortified compound on the river's bend, where the water's murmur hid darker dealings. By noon, as heat mirages danced on the horizon, scouts reported movement, Mills' men patrolling the fences, the silver trucks kin, more vehicles with tinted windows, gathering like storm clouds. Ethan rode point, wind whipping his vest, the scar on his jaw a reminder of battles won through cunning, not brute force. Clara and Tommy had been relocated to a safe house run by the Vow's allies. A quiet farmhouse with wildflowers nodding in the breeze, guarded by a rotating watch. The boy's cry had ignited this fire, but the flames now licked at Willow Creek's core, promising a reckoning rooted in honor. As the compound loomed, silos echoing the Mills ghosts, Ethan felt the pull of redemption. The chosen family at his back, a shield against the encroaching dark. The ride continued, justice unfolding not in chaos, but in the steady pursuit of truth. The midday sun beat down on the river's bend like a relentless forge, turning the air into a shimmering haze that distorted the fortified compound ahead. Ethan Harlan led the swelling convoy of 30 Iron Vow riders, their engines a low, unified growl that echoed off the water and the looming silos, stirring birds from their perches in frantic flight. The compound sprawled like a scar on the landscape, barbed wire fencing glinting cruelly, guard shacks perched on stilts overlooking the muddy banks, and a cluster of low buildings where the scent of diesel and damp rot hung thick. Harlan Mills's domain, a hub of whispered dealings that had choked Willow Creek's spirit for years, now braced for the storm, rolling in on 2 wheels. Ethan signaled a halt at the tree line, the bikes fanning out in a tactical arc, dust settling like a veil over leather-clad figures dismounting with quiet efficiency. Samuel Forge Kane, his broad frame casting a long shadow, checked his sidearm, not for use, but as a reminder of boundaries crossed in past lives. Jonathan Reyes, the young scout, slipped ahead on foot, his lithe form vanishing into the underbrush, the rustle of leaves the only trace. Ethan's mind churned with the weight of it all. Clara's vanished husband, the debts that masked something darker, the sheriff's evasion that morning. This wasn't about the purse anymore. It was about excavating the roots of fear that had silenced families like the Hales, fulfilling the vow Jax had extracted in a haze of pain and fading light. From the compound's gates, Mills's men emerged, 5 in total, burly figures in faded caps and work boots, clutching bats and chains that dangled like threats unspoken. They formed a ragged line, the clink of metal against concrete, cutting through the humid air, their postures aggressive, but eyes flickering with uncertainty at the sight of the riders. One, a stocky man with a bandana tied low, shouted across the distance, "This private property! Turn around before you get hurt!" His voice boomed, but it carried the hollow ring of bluff, the river's lap against the pilings, underscoring the isolation. Ethan stepped forward, boots crunching on parched earth, his vest's emblem catching the sun, a iron vow etched in weathered thread. The crew held position, a wall of resolve that didn't advance but didn't yield, the scent of sagebrush and engine oil mingling in the breeze. "We're not here for trouble, friend," Ethan called back, his tone even, carrying the gravel of desert nights. just answers, about a missing man, about shaking down folks who can't fight back. The words hung, probing like a key in a rusted lock. Behind him, Lucas murmured into a comms device, coordinating with Deputy Reed, who trailed at a distance in his cruiser, lights off, a reluctant witness to the unfolding. The bandana-clad guard sneered, but hesitation rippled through his group. One shifted, glancing back at the main building, where shadows moved behind tinted windows. Jonathan's voice crackled softly in Ethan's earpiece. "Two more inside, near the office. Looks like paperwork, ledgers maybe. And that silver truck's here, tucked in the garage." Ethan's scar pulled tight as he processed it. Memories flooding of his own reckoning after Jax's loss, the nights piecing together truths buried under official lies. This compound wasn't just a den, it was a vault of secrets, where protection rackets evolved into disappearances, all shielded by a badge that should have stood for justice. Sheriff Elias Harlan's SUV crested the dirt road then, kicking up a plume of dust that settled like fallout. He barreled through the gates without stopping, his face thunderous as he slammed to a halt amid his own men. "What in blazes is this circus?" he bellowed, stepping out with the authority of a man clinging to frayed reins. His uniform strained at the seams, cologne cutting sharp against the earthy air, but his eyes darted to the riders, to his guards, to the uninvited deputy pulling up behind. "Harlan," he spat at Ethan, the shared surname, a bitter irony. "I warned you, this is interference. Mills has rights." Ethan met the sheriff's glare, the sun's glare turning the moment into a stark tableau, sweat beading on both men's brows. Rights? Like the right to vanish a man for not paying tribute. Clara Hale's husband worked these mills. Town knows the score, Elias. We're here to set it straight, for the little ones left wondering. The words landed like stones in still water, stirring murmurs from the guards, one of whom lowered his chain, face paling as if recognition dawned. Samuel edged closer, his presence a steady anchor, while Caleb Voss scanned the perimeter, phone ready to capture any escalation. Elias blustered, radioing for backup that wouldn't come fast enough, his voice rising in pitch as doubt cracked his facade. Mills himself appeared then, emerging from the office door, a gaunt figure in a crisp shirt, his eyes cold as the river's depths. He was flanked by two more men, suits ill-fitting over bulk, and carrying clipboards that screamed legitimacy's mask. "Sheriff," Mills said smoothly, his tone oiled with false calm. "These interlopers are trespassing. Handle it." But as he spoke, Jonathan signaled from the shadows, a nod toward a side shed, where a faint scuffle suggested hidden activity, perhaps the ledgers or worse. The tension coiled tighter, the air electric with unspoken stakes. Deputy Reed dismounted, approaching with hands visible, his lanky frame a bridge between worlds. "Sheriff, we got reports. Multiple. Folks tired of the shadows. Let 'em talk." Elias whirled on him, betrayal flashing, but the deputy's steady gaze held, a spark of conscience ignited by the night's events. Ethan seized the pause, advancing a step. "No one's drawing lines today. Just truth. Hand over what you have on Hale, or we wait for the right eyes to see." Mill's composure slipped, his hand twitching toward a pocket, but Samuel's low rumble, "Easy," kept the peace. The sheriff barked orders to his men, dispersing them like scolded dogs, the clatter of dropped chains echoing. Inside the office, under Reed's watchful eye, drawers yielded papers, faded contracts, IOUs marked with threats, a file on the missing husband suggesting relocation under duress, not accident. The air inside reeked of stale coffee and ink, fluorescent lights humming as revelations unfolded. Clara's husband hadn't vanished. He'd been pressured out, silenced by fear, his absence a warning to others. As the sun arced toward afternoon, casting elongated shadows across the compound, the riders stood vigil, their loyalty a silent force eroding the walls of corruption. Ethan watched Mills slink back, the gaunt man's empire cracking under moral weight. Tommy's cry had led here, to this pivot where promises intersected with justice, chosen family outshining blood ties. But deeper layers lingered, the sheriff's full complicity, Mills' wider web, hinting at a ride yet unfinished. In the quiet aftermath, as Reed bagged evidence, Ethan felt Jax's vow pulse like a heartbeat. Protect the vulnerable. Willow Creek stirred, the shockwaves of honor rippling outward, binding the broken in redemption's light. If this moment of truth touched you, smash that like button below. It fuels stories like these to keep rolling. The afternoon sun dipped lower over the river's bend, turning the compound's barbed wire into a lattice of fiery threads that snagged the light. Ethan Harlan wiped sweat from his brow, the salty sting mixing with the metallic tang of rust in the air, as Deputy Marcus Reed sifted through the office drawers. Stacks of yellowed papers spilled onto the scarred desk, contracts laced with fine print that screamed coercion, IOUs scrawled in hasty ink, and a single dog-eared file labeled Hail. Ethan's eyes locked on it, the name hitting like a gut punch, stirring the dust of his own unresolved grief. Clara's husband, David Hale, hadn't simply walked away. The notes detailed relocation agreements, veiled threats disguised as debts, his signature forged under duress. The room's stale air thickened, the hum of a faulty fan overhead chopping the silence like erratic breaths. Mills paced the far wall, his gaunt frame casting jittery shadows, while Sheriff Elias Harlan loomed in the doorway, his face a mask of crumbling bluster. The riders held the perimeter outside, their boots planted firm on sun-baked earth, the low murmur of engines idling like a watchful pulse. Samuel Forge Kane stood guard at the threshold, his scarred hands flexing subtly, a reminder of forges both literal and figurative that had tempered his loyalty. Jonathan Reyes slipped back from his scout, whispering to Ethan through the cracked door. More vehicles inbound, 3 trucks, heavy tires, Mills out-of-town muscle. The words hung, sharpening the edge of anticipation. The river's steady rush, underscoring the fragility of this standoff. Ethan stepped closer to the desk, his presence filling the cramped space like a gathering storm. "This ends the charade, Mills," he said, voice low and unyielding, the scar on his jaw pulling taut in the slanting light. He flipped open the Hale file, pages whispering accusations. Payments funneled to the sheriff's discretionary fund, David's last known sighting near the old docks, a vague report of an accident swept under official rugs. Clara's face flashed in Ethan's mind, pale and resolute, now safe at the farmhouse with Tommy, but forever scarred by absence. This corruption wasn't abstract. It was the thief of futures, the breaker of homes, echoing the void Jax's death had carved in his soul. You preyed on a man trying to provide. For what? To line pockets in a town that's supposed to protect its own. Mills halted, his cold eyes flickering with a mix of defiance and calculation, the crisp shirt now wilted under the heat. Business, Harlan. Debts get paid one way or another. Hale knew the risks, but his voice wavered, the lie thin as the compound's peeling paint. Elias interjected, stepping forward with forced authority, his cologne clashing against the musty odor of old files. Enough. This is hearsay. You bikers think you can waltz in and play judge? His gaze darted to Reed, seeking alliance, but the deputy met it with a steady resolve, bagging documents with deliberate care, the plastic crinkling like breaking trust. Outside, the growl of approaching engines shattered the fragile calm. 3 dust-caked trucks rumbling through the gates, their tires chewing gravel into clouds that billowed like smoke signals. More of Mills' crew piled out, 8 men, rough-hewn and armed with the casual menace of bats and tire irons, their faces set in hard lines under the relentless sun. The air crackled with tension, the scent of hot rubber and sweat amplifying the standoff. Lucas moved swiftly, signaling the riders to tighten their formation, a human barrier of denim and determination that didn't advance but radiated unshakable presence. Caleb Voss flanked Ethan at the door, his lanky frame coiled, ready to bridge words and action if needed. Ethan emerged into the glare, the sun warming his leather vest like an old friend's embrace, and faced the newcomers head-on. "Stand down!" he called, his tone carrying the weight of shared battles, not aggression. "We're not here to spill blood, just to unearth what's buried." The lead truck man, a barrel-chested figure with a faded tattoo peeking from his sleeve, hesitated, bat half raised, his eyes scanning the ring of riders, 30 strong now, a brotherhood forged in vows deeper than the river's currents. Whispers rippled through Mill's group. Tales of the Iron Vow had spread like sagebrush fire, stories of quiet interventions that toppled giants without a shot fired. Sheriff Elias pushed past Ethan, his boots thudding on the porch, radio crackling urgently at his hip. "Disperse! That's an order!" But his command faltered as Reed followed, evidence bag in hand, his voice cutting clear. "Sheriff, this goes to the state now. No more covering." The deputy's words ignited a spark. Elias's face flushed crimson, his hand twitching toward his holster. But Samuel's low rumble from the side held him in check. "Easy, lawman. We've all got oaths. Yours just got a little dusty." The moment stretched, taut as a bowstring, the compound's silos casting elongated shadows that merged with the gathering dusk. Mills slunk to the porch's edge, his empire fracturing under the moral glare. "You don't understand," he muttered, more to himself. The river's murmur mocking his unraveling. Ethan turned to him, eyes softened by the empathy of one who'd stared into similar abysses. "I understand plenty. Lost a brother to shadows like these. Promised him I'd watch for the ones left behind, like Tommy Hale, crying on that road." The name landed, humanizing the abstract, and a murmur stirred among the newcomers, one lowering his bat as doubt crept in. These weren't monsters, they were men ensnared in webs of greed, much like Elias, whose shoulders slumped imperceptibly. As the sun kissed the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples, state troopers finally crested the road. Reed's anonymous tip bearing fruit, their sirens a distant wail growing louder. Mill's men shifted uneasily, the tide turning not through force, but the inexorable pull of truth exposed. Ethan felt the vow pulse through him, Jax's words a steady anchor amid the chaos. Protect the little ones. Clara's family photo, now safely returned, symbolized more than a purse. It was the thread binding broken lives, the chosen family of riders, standing as sentinels against the dark. The troopers arrived in a flurry of lights and barked commands, cuffing Mills and Elias amid protests that dissolved into silence. Documents secured, the compound's gates swung open to investigators, the air lightening as if the river itself exhaled relief. Ethan watched from the tree line, his crew dispersing with nods of quiet pride, engines fading into the twilight. But as stars pricked the velvet sky, a final whisper reached him through the network. Hale was alive, hidden in a neighboring town, silenced but not broken. The ride wasn't over. Redemption demanded one last push to reunite what corruption had torn asunder. Willow Creek's shockwaves continued, Honor's legacy rolling on like the endless road. The twilight deepened over the river's bend, the compound's silos standing like solemn witnesses as state troopers swarmed the grounds, their flashlights carving paths through the gathering dusk. Ethan Harlan lingered at the tree line, the cool evening breeze rustling the cottonwoods and carrying the faint briny scent of the water below. His leather vest felt heavier now, weighed by the day's revelations, but a quiet satisfaction stirred beneath the fatigue, the kind that came from oaths fulfilled, not shattered. The Iron Vow riders had begun to peel away, engines humming softly into the distance, their silhouettes merging with the fading light, like ghosts returning to the road. Samuel Forge Kane clapped Ethan on the shoulder one last time, his gravelly voice a murmur against the troopers' radios. "We did right by the kid, Ridge. Jack'st be proud." Ethan nodded, the scar on his jaw a faint ache in the cooling air, as the big man mounted his bike and rode off, tail light winking like a farewell star. Inside the office, the chaos had settled into methodical order. Deputy Marcus Reed oversaw the evidence handover, his lanky frame straight with newfound purpose, the plastic bags crinkling under the harsh glow of portable lamps. Harlan Mills sat cuffed on a metal chair, his gaunt features hollowed by defeat, the crisp shirt now rumpled and stained with sweat. Sheriff Elias Harlan paced nearby, his bluster reduced to sullen glares, the badge on his chest a tarnished relic in the lamplight. The ledgers and files, pages yellowed with secrets, piled high on the desk, each one a thread unraveling the web of protection rackets, coerced silences, and fabricated debts that had strangled Willow Creek for too long. Ethan's mind replayed the afternoon's tension, the arriving trucks, the lowered bats, the moment truth pierced the facade like dawn through fog. No shots fired, no blood spilled, just the unyielding force of men bound by promise, exposing rot without becoming it. A trooper approached Ethan, her uniform crisp against the dusty backdrop, notebook in hand. "Mr. Harlan, we've cross-checked the network tip. David Hale, he's alive. Holed up in a motel across the county line working odd jobs under an alias, afraid to come back after the threats. We've got a team en route to bring him in safely." The words landed soft but seismic, stirring the air like a stone skipped across the river's surface. Ethan's chest tightened, visions of Tommy's tear-streaked face blending with memories of his own daughter, her small hand slipping from his in a hospital room years gone. This wasn't just closure for the Hales, it was the vow breathing life anew, Jax's dying charge echoing in the rustle of leaves. "Watch over the little ones, keep 'em safe." He pulled out his phone, thumbing a message to the farmhouse where Clara and Tommy waited, guarded by a few lingering riders. "It's time," he typed. The screen's glow warm against the encroaching night. The drive back to Willow Creek unfolded under a canopy of stars. The convoy reformed, but lighter now, headlights slicing the velvet dark like beacons of resolve. Ethan rode point, the Harley's engine a steady thrum that vibrated through his bones, the wind whipping scents of wild sage and cooling earth across his face. Behind him, Lucas and Caleb flanked the borrowed sedan carrying Clara and Tommy, their bikes a protective shield against the shadows of the road. The town emerged gradually, its sleepy streets bathed in the soft amber of street lamps, porch lights flickering like hesitant welcomes. Word had spread faster than the dust trails. Folks gathered on sidewalks, murmuring in clusters, their faces illuminated by the glow of cell phones, sharing snippets of the day's upheaval. Willow Creek, once bowed under unspoken fears, now buzzed with a tentative hope, the air alive with the possibility of mending. They pulled into the farmhouse driveway as the moon crested high, its silver light pooling on the wildflower-strewn lawn. Clara stepped out first, her dress catching the breeze. Tommy close at her side, his backpack slung over one shoulder like a talisman of normalcy. The boy's eyes widened at the sight of the riders dismounting, their boots soft on the gravel, but when Ethan approached, a shy smile broke through the remnants of his fear. "You came back," Tommy said, voice small but steady, the night's chill nipping at his words. Ethan knelt again, the ground damp beneath him, and ruffled the boy's hair gently. "Always, kid. Promises like ours don't fade with the dark." Minutes stretched into an eternity of waiting, the farmhouse's kitchen light spilling warm onto the porch where the group gathered, mugs of coffee steaming in calloused hands, the aroma mingling with the earthy scent of dew-kissed grass. Then headlights pierced the lane, 2 state cruisers, unmarked and discreet, escorting a nondescript sedan. David Hale emerged slowly, his frame leaner than Clara remembered, face etched with the wear of hidden years, but his eyes, those same kind eyes Tommy had inherited, lit with disbelief as he spotted his family. The reunion unfolded in hushed tones, Clara's sob breaking the quiet like fragile porcelain, her arms enveloping him as Tommy buried his face in his father's side. No grand speeches, just the raw authenticity of embrace. The river's distant murmur a soothing underscore to tears, long overdue. Ethan stood back with the crew, the scene a tableau of redemption under the stars, chosen family witnessing blood's quiet reclaiming. David glanced over, nodding gratitude that needed no words, his voice rough when he finally spoke. "Heard what you did, for them, for the town." Ethan met his gaze, the weight of Jax's vow lifting slightly, replaced by the lightness of purpose, renewed. "We ride for that. Honors what keeps the road straight." As the troopers departed, leaving the Hales to their fragile peace, the riders mounted up one last time, engines coughing to life in a farewell roar that shook the night. Willow Creek transformed in the days that followed, the compound's secrets spilling into headlines that painted the Iron Vow not as outlaws, but as the spine the town had lost. Mills faced charges that peeled back layers of graft, Elias's badge stripped in a quiet hearing, the river's bend reclaimed for honest work. Ethan rode on, the convoy scattering to their chapters, but the bond deepened, messages pinging across the network. Tales of Tommy's first bike ride with his dad, Clara's garden blooming unchecked. The boy's cry on that dusty road had shocked the town into awakening, but it was the promise, unyielding and silent, that ensured the dawn held more light than shadow. In the end, justice wasn't a thunderclap. It was the steady roll of wheels, carrying honor through the endless miles. Thank you for riding along to the end of this story. If it moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more tales of unbreakable vows coming your way. Drop a comment below. What promise would you keep, no matter the cost?